What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Cobra, and as this 2022 season is over, there are a ton of question marks going into 2023. There are so many players on this team who we don't know if they're coming or going, and it's pretty plausible that this Red Sox team is going to look entirely different in 2023. Now, one of the biggest problems with the 2022 Red Sox was their pitching staff. They had the 4th highest reliever ERA in baseball and the 9th highest starter ERA in baseball. Needless to say, this offseason, starting pitching and relief pitching are huge pain points for this Red Sox team, and one of the most important pieces of both sides of that equation is Garrett Whitlock. The question of whether or not he will be starting, whether or not he'll be relieving, maybe he'll be doing a little bit of both, has been up in the air for a little bit now, and it's only coming to a head this off season. So that is what we are talking about today. We're talking about every possible scenario for Garrett Whitlock, and I want you guys to let me know in the comment section down below which of these scenarios are you choosing after you've heard both arguments from both sides. But before we get into that, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It helps it out a ton and would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Like I said, there are a couple different scenarios for Garrett Whitlock in this 2023 season, and to fully understand each side, we got to do a little bit of digging. We got to dig deep into the statistics, and it's pretty interesting when you look at it, because as a starter and a reliever last year in 2022, Garrett Whitlock had almost the exact same amount of innings. He had 39 innings pitched as a starter and 39 1/3 innings as a reliever, and the statistics are pretty interesting. As a starter, Garrett Whitlock had 9 starts in 2022, where he had a 4.15 ERA, a whip of 1.256, a K per 9 of 8.8, and opponents were hitting 261 off of him with a 723 OPS. He ended up statistically about at league average for a starting pitcher. In his relief appearances, Garrett Whitlock had an ERA of 2.75, a .788 whip, a K per 9 of 10.1, and opponents were hitting 179 off of him with a 547 OPS. So it's pretty clear based on just top line statistics alone which side of this equation Garrett Whitlock was more dominant in. I don't necessarily think I needed to put those statistics out there for you guys to understand that, but I just wanted to make it crystal clear that statistically Garrett Whitlock was much more efficient and effective out of the bullpen than he was as a starter in 2022. But there's also more that we need to talk about with Garrett Whitlock, and one of those is injuries, right? He was injured as a starter this year. Pretty early on in the year, was out for a little bit. He was injured as a reliever. Towards the end of this year, he ended up getting hip surgery because of that earlier injury. So there's a possibility that some of these statistics are a little skewed, both on the relief side and on the starting pitching side. If he was trying to battle through something as a starter, that's obviously going to skew statistics, and we know for a fact that he was battling through something as a reliever. So there's a possibility that both of these stats are a little bit inflated because of his injury problems this year in 2022. The second thing we need to talk about is that there is a learning curve with starting pitching, right? We saw that firsthand in a kind of different capacity with Brayan Bello, who has turned into one of our more dominant pitchers in his last couple of starts, but there was a learning curve when he came up here. There's a big difference, especially between the minors and the majors, but also between the relief side of things and the starting side of things in terms of stamina, in terms of timing, in terms of the way you approach batters, right? Because you're going to be facing them more than once. There's a game inside a game inside a game when it comes to starting pitching, and that's a learning curve for people. Garrett Whitlock only got 9 starts because of that injury, so we don't really truly know if his learning curve had been fully developed at that point. So there is a possibility that those starting statistics are a little bit skewed because of the fact that he had not fully developed himself into a starter in terms of mentality, in terms of stamina, and in terms of approach. The third thing we need to remember here is that our bullpen this year was terrible. We talked about it already, right? They were 4th highest in the league. That's not good at all. In my opinion, if Garrett Whitlock had gone into the rotation and our bullpen was really, really solid, right? And losing him sucked, yes, but they managed and they were still really good. I don't know if this would be a thing that we're talking about right now, but because of the fact that this bullpen was terrible this year, losing Garrett Whitlock created way more problems in the bullpen than it created solutions in the rotation. So that's one more thing to remember as we talk about each scenario. So what would each scenario look like? What would Garrett Whitlock look like in the 2023 team as a starting pitcher? There are a couple positive effects that Garrett Whitlock could have on this rotation, but there are also some possible negative ones as well. And this first one we're talking about could be a little bit of a mix of both. That is that there will be less room to play with for the front office in this rotation if Garrett Whitlock becomes part of it. Going into 2023, you only have 3 surefire shoo-ins to be in this rotation. You've got Nick Pivetta, who some people don't even want in the rotation going into 2023, but that's a different story. You've got Brian Bayo, who needs to be in this rotation, better be in this rotation, and you got Chris Sale. And we all know how reliable Chris Sale has been lately, but he says he's going to be healthy. He's still under contract. I'm going to consider him a part of this rotation for now. Adding Garrett Whitlock in there only really leaves you with one true spot to play around with. Obviously, you can have a 6, 7 starter as sort of a spot starter, but when you're talking about true starters in baseball, you usually have a 5-man rotation. So adding Garrett Whitlock in there will give you less room to play with in free agency / the trading period, which could be good and bad, right? It allows you to really shore up most of your rotation, so you only have to worry about one position. But at the same time too, if you want true improvement on this pitching staff, because again, it was one of the worst in baseball this year, adding Garrett Whitlock in limits your ability to go out and bring in outside sources to improve that. So again, kind of positive, kind of negative, a little bit of mix of both. The next thing we need to talk about is the fact that there could still be more of a learning curve for Garrett Whitlock when he gets into this rotation, if he gets into this rotation again. We talked about it when we were talking about his statistics, right? There is a learning curve to starting pitching, and we don't fully know how close Garrett Whitlock was or how far away he was. But at the same time too, if they tell him, hey, in 2 weeks, right, when the season's fully over, maybe November, whatever, 7th or 8th, they look at him, they go, look, you're going to be in our starting rotation. You're going to be the 5th man in our rotation next year. Start figuring out, we're going to work with you to become a starting pitcher. You've got the entire offseason, you've got all of spring training, and you have that ability to kind of go along that learning curve much quicker than he was able to this year. There is a possibility that if you tell him right away, that learning curve is not a problem. But again, if you wait until the end of spring training and you're like, look, now you're going to be a starter, there could be more learning curve to that, and that could end up being a negative result on this pitching rotation. The last kind of effect that Garrett Whitlock would have on this rotation is you'd be able to use your deadliest pitching weapon for more innings, right? Generally, as a starting pitcher in the major leagues, you get more innings than a guy in the bullpen. Now, we all know what Garrett Whitlock is capable of. We know he's one of the best relievers in baseball, and we know he's one of the most talented pitchers in baseball. If you can use that for more innings over the course of the season, statistically and hypothetically, that should improve your team more than if you were only using him out of the bullpen and you limited his innings, right? That kind of makes sense. So there's that positive as well. You get to use your best pitcher and best reliever on this team for more innings, and that's usually a good thing. The pros as a reliever are pretty obvious, right? We talked about them having a little bit more flexibility in the rotation if he stays as a reliever, but you're also playing to Garrett Whitlock's established strengths. We know exactly what he can be out of that bullpen when fully healthy, because he, again, is one of the best and most talented pitchers in baseball out of that bullpen. He is our deadliest weapon, and if you keep him in the bullpen, you have that ability to grow this bullpen around him. Again, 4th highest ERA in baseball, right? If you establish that Garrett Whitlock's going to be your 8th, 9th inning guy, maybe you say Houck's your closer, but Garrett Whitlock is that dude. When we need him, you go in, you take it, right? That's Garrett Whitlock. You can build around that and create a really solid bullpen as Garrett Whitlock being the focal point. And that could add a ton of assurance to this bullpen that we really haven't had, because in 2021, we were kind of all over the place with who was going to close. Matt Barnes was good for a little bit, then it wasn't, and we had our issues there. In 2022, obviously it wasn't very good. So in 2023, let's shore up what our bullpen's going to look like and build around that. And if Garrett Whitlock's in there, that's not a bad thing at all. But again, you lose that ability to use your best weapon in the most innings that you possibly could. And is it the optimal place for Garrett Whitlock? Each side really does have its pro and con. If you want my opinion, I say let him be a starter, but only in a particular way. The way I'm talking about is what I explained when we were talking about his scenario as a starting pitcher. You need to tell him as soon as possible. He needs to be able to take this offseason, 1, get fully healthy, obviously, and 2, get prepared. Be ready to be a starting pitcher. No more of this, April, May, and June, we're going to have you as a long reliever. Then July, we're going to have you as a closer. Then August and September, we're going to try you out as a starting pitcher and see how it goes, because he cannot adjust to anything if you are constantly changing his position on the field, right? That doesn't seem like an effective or optimal use of one of the game's most talented pitchers. If you choose a spot, you need to keep him in that spot. And for me, it makes sense for the starting rotation. We've had question marks in this rotation throughout the entire year. Yes, Garrett Whitlock was part of this injury crusade that the Red Sox went on this year, but so was everybody, right? I'm not super concerned with Garrett Whitlock's health, and I think that if you were able to use our best weapon for the most amount of innings and get the most out of them, you kind of have to do that. In my opinion, that's the best way to utilize such a good pitcher. But I could be wrong, right? I'm not perfect, and you guys may disagree, so let me know in the comment section down below. You've heard both sides, you've heard the pros, you've heard the cons, you've seen how the stats compare to each other, all the circumstances surrounding Garrett Whitlock, so let me know. Let me know in the comment section down below, what are you choosing? Are you choosing a starter? Are you choosing a reliever? Is there a possibility that you want him to do both? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, you made it to the end of this video. We talk Red Sox almost every single day. You might as well hit it. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It helps these videos out a ton and would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seat.